Guys, what's going on? Welcome to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath, and in this video, we are going to discuss Bob Dylan, Travelin Thru. This is the Bootleg Series Volume 15, and it chronicles one of my favorite periods in the entire career of Bob Dylan. This is the country era, 1967 to 1969. The albums that were yielded from this time period are John Wesley Harding, Nashville Skyline, and Self-Portrait. But in addition to being Bob Dylan's story, this is also Johnny Cash's story. Johnny Cash is present on roughly half of these tracks, and his influence is huge on these recordings. So what we're going to do in this video is flip the camera around and really lay this out, unbox it on camera, talk about what makes this material special, put it in its proper context. I've got a ton of supplemental material laid out here that will help us to understand when this occurred, why it is special, and where we can go from here after we've listened to this. So let's dig in. Guys, here it is, Bob Dylan, Travelin Thru. We're going to unbox this thing, show you all the inner artwork. This is 1967 to 1969. But first, I feel like to understand why this material is important, we're going to take a brief history lesson for context. The story does not start in 1967. The story of this album really starts in 1966 with the arrival of Blonde on Blonde. This album was recorded in Nashville. The stories around the sessions for this are legendary. Reportedly, there's about 70 hours of tape that was recorded for these sessions, and a lot of it has been chronicled in the Bootleg series. But this album presents Dylan at his biggest pinnacle, that rock and roll, electric, hippie icon, frankly. And there was nowhere to go from this avenue that Dylan had found himself traveling down. He was a poet, he was a prophet. Every word was being hung upon, and it was the subsequent tour that is chronicled in this series. This is the 1966 live recordings. All of Dylan's entire tour, his 1966 live tour, is chronicled in this box set, and these are the shows. And these are complete shows, you guys. This is a incredible box set, but it shows basically an antagonistic Bob Dylan, an exhausted Bob Dylan that is so tired of being called a traitor, of being accused of turning his back on his audience. This finds Dylan at sort of the end of a road. And it's after this tour that the alleged motorcycle accident happened. Reportedly, after this tour, Bob Dylan was in a motorcycle accident that really messed him up, and he canceled the rest of his tour dates, and he just disappeared. And whether or not the motorcycle crash actually happened, or it was a smokescreen so that he could just recover, so that he could have some time to figure out who he was and where he was going to go next, that's up for debate. But what we do know is that after this tour, after the time off, he goes to New York, upstate, with the musicians that would become the band, and they record what we know as the basement tapes. And this is another Bootleg series release. This is the complete basement tapes. It's a 6-disc set. It's highly recommended if you're into Dylan. But this is Bob Dylan trying to reconnect with his roots, trying to simplify. When you're accused, that's an interesting word, but when you are labeled a prophet and people are hanging on every single word, what do? You reconnect with the opposite. You go in the opposite direction. The Beatles were working on Sgt. Pepper. The Rolling Stones, their Satanic Majesties. The Beach Boys had put out Pet Sounds a year prior to this. Things were becoming more and more complex, complicated. Bob Dylan decides to simplify and to strip down and go back to basics. And it was that simplification that led to the recording of these 3 albums: John Wesley Harding, Nashville Skyline, and Self-Portrait. And these 3 albums represent a very different Bob Dylan. This is Dylan refusing to play by the rules that society has put on him. It's country Bob Dylan. And whereas he had, this album full of, this was a double LP, and some of these songs are 6, 8, 9 minutes. They're long songs. These songs are like 2.5 minutes most of the time. Short country songs. So he was zigging when everyone else had zagged. He was just refusing to play by society's rules. And this is where we find Bob Dylan in Travelin Thru, 1967 to 1969. So I have had an absolute joy discovering the music on this set. It's a 3-disc set. We have an incredible booklet. We'll go through this booklet page by page. But the music on these albums is incredible. There's actually, it's a 3 LP set as well. I opted for the CD since, well, one, it was cheaper, and two, because most of my, actually all of my Dylan bootleg series are CD, so I kind of wanted the matching set. But it's just incredible music for figuring out, you know, we talk about the 70 hours of production for Blonde on Blonde. Reportedly, you know, if the book can be believed, which I have no reason to doubt it, there are only a handful of takes for most of these songs. He went in there, they recorded the entire album of John Wesley Harding in about, I believe it says 9 hours versus 70. It's just really, really stripped down, lean, simple. And that's what I love about it, because it's just, that is innovative. When everybody's doing one thing and you've built this empire and then you go in a different direction, that's really cool to me. So these are the tracks that are here. We have our John Wesley Harding sessions and then the Nashville Skyline sessions. Nashville Skyline, one of my favorite Dylan albums. It's so beautiful and simple, and if you've heard it, you know that voice that he uses, it's like this crooner country voice. It's a voice we didn't hear before this, and we didn't really hear after that either. But this album is basically just Dylan in the studio figuring out songs. Look, we have nothing beyond a take 4. Some of these songs only had a couple of takes, but it's interesting to see how clear the vision was, and it's also interesting to see how certain things, like All Along the Watchtower, was almost fully formed, but not quite. Like, there's just subtle variations in things in some of the recording sessions. So we'll put that there. Let's look at disc 2. This is where things really get, for me, incredible. This is with Johnny Cash, and you'll see here every single song here. This is the Bob Dylan Johnny Cash sessions. Dylan and Cash go into the studio together, presumably with the intention of recording an album together, an album of duets. Now, we know that on Nashville Skyline, they do, there is a duet together. On Nashville Skyline, the opening track is The Girl from North Country. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, because all of these are songs that they were working on together. And there's some really great stuff here. One of the highlights for me in this box set is they're doing like a duet on, so Dylan is singing Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. Johnny Cash is singing Understand Your Man. So Johnny Cash reportedly wrote Understand Your Man in the same chords, the same chord progression, the same melody and tune as Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, as like an homage. So what they're doing, they're both singing their song. So Dylan is singing his song, Cash is singing his song, and it's just clear how they're the same song, but with different lyrics. And then Cash goes at the end of the session, well, the phrasing works out on that really well, because we both stole it from the same song. It's just really funny. Another thing that emerges during these sessions is how, I don't want to say deferential that Bob Dylan was, but he seems very shy. He's very quiet. Johnny Cash seems like the alpha in the room. And maybe that makes sense because he was older. Cash was older than Dylan. Matchbox. You guys, Carl Perkins. At this point in time, Carl Perkins was opening for Johnny Cash. He was in Johnny Cash's band, replacing Luther Perkins, no relation, who had died. Luther Perkins, Luther played the boogie woogie. If you guys know Johnny Cash, Luther Perkins was a part of that signature sound. He died in a house fire, I believe it was. And Carl Perkins had kind of stepped up to fill that role. So Carl Perkins is in on so many of these sessions, and he'll tell us in the booklet what the actual personnel was, but it's just so fascinating to me. They're doing Matchbox, which is a Carl Perkins song, with Carl Perkins in the room. Look, Elvis, That's All Right Mama, Mystery Train, Carl Perkins playing guitar on these songs that he was there for. Have you guys seen, the photo of the $1 billion trio? The photo of the $1 million trio, you got Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash, and Elvis Presley. Those were the giants, man, the Sun Record giants. And Johnny and Carl Perkins in the same room together with Bob Dylan, paying homage to those rock and roll roots, rock roots, country roots. You can't qualify it as one thing or the other. It's all just part of that same magic blend. It all comes from the same place. And then here is our third disc, and this is more of Johnny Cash sessions. The earliest version of Wanted Man. I love this song, Wanted Man. This is reportedly, according to the book, take 1, Wanted Man. This is the earliest recorded version of Wanted Man. It was being worked on while they were doing it. 1 week after these sessions, Johnny Cash plays San Quentin. This live album is recorded, and he opens it with Wanted Man. He knew the song from these sessions. It's so interesting to see the history of these songs, these artists. They do a Jimmy Rogers medley paying tribute to the foundation of country. Then we have Bob Dylan on the Johnny Cash show. There's 3 performances, the 2 that he does by himself, and then of course the duet with Johnny Cash for Girl from the North Country. We have our self-portrait outtakes. Ring of Fire and Folsom Prison Blues, I don't think these have ever been collected on any sort of a bootleg, an official bootleg series released before. These are incredible. They are so smoking. The Ring of Fire and Folsom Prison Blues, they are just wailing guitar. It is not a country version of those songs. It is a rock version of those songs, and it is very, very cool. And then the last thing is these are Earl Scruggs. Basically Johnny playing with Earl Scruggs. Early versions of the Nashville Skyline Rag, Honey Just Allow Me One More Chance. So you got Scruggs, one of the banjo legends, playing with Bob Dylan while he's in Nashville. Absolutely essential stuff for fans of country music history, rock music history. Okay, so let's go through the booklet. You know, I'm gonna pack this. I'm gonna clear some of this away so that we have more room to look at our booklets. We'll go page by page through this, but we won't take too long. The opening, the introduction, is by Ben Rollins. Look, this is outside the Grand Ole Opry, the Ryman Auditorium, and these are the counterculture kids that showed up to hear Bob Dylan play. You know, normally it would be a lot of country fans. People would come from all over the world. If you guys watch the Ken Burns country music documentary about how it talks about how people would come from all over America to the Grand Ole Opry for to hear some country and western music, and here we have the counterculture showing up for Dylan. We have a 2-page introduction or an intro by Roseanne Cash, Johnny's daughter, putting this into context as well. And then this essay, this is so informative. Check out this picture. This one of the fantastic pictures. Bob Dylan, defiant, cocky, a little aggressive. I love it. But this gives us so much information about these sessions, about the years that we're dealing with, what happened, what may have happened. Look at this alternate photo from John Wesley Harding. It looks like it was taken 100 years ago, maybe 100 years ago when it, 100 years before it actually was shot. We have handwritten lyrics, alternate photo, cover photo for Nashville Skyline, taken from the performance on the Johnny Cash show, 1969. Again, taken from the Johnny Cash show. Fantastic. And then handwritten lyrics to Wanted Man. You guys, I love this song, Wanted Man. And the recording is really funny because you can tell they're just kind of going with it. Like, Dylan seems to know more than Johnny Cash, like what they're saying. And it's just really spontaneous. The way they fed off of each other was really interesting and really, it's just very cool. They clearly respected each other very well. But this booklet ends kind of ominously. I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it for you if you wanna. I'm just gonna if you don't want to know anything about this, if you're picking it up, you don't have to buy it. But this gave me chills. This is around 10 p.m. on May 3rd, 1969. After Dylan wrapped up Folsom Prison Blues and Ring of Fire, he left Columbia Studio A. To date, he has never ever says he's never recorded again in Nashville. That was 50 years ago as I'm making this video. Dylan has never recorded again in Nashville. What a crazy fate, man. It's just crazy. So here's our recording sessions, all the specifics about what versions, who played on these tracks, and you can see Dylan and Cash, a lot of cool personnel. Carl Perkins guitar, CD2 tracks 8 through 10, CD3 2, 4, 5, and 6. More handwritten lyrics. So if you're on the fence about this set, I highly recommend it. It doesn't seem like, when we have these big lavish, here, I had to grab it, like this tour set with all of these discs. This can seem kind of meager. It can kind of seem like they're leaving a lot of stuff out. But I actually appreciate the curation that has gone on with this set because it's so focused. And according to the notes, there's not a lot of variation as far as, you know, he went in with a vision. He went in knowing what he wanted to make, and what they've presented us with is the best illustrative examples of how the sound changed and how the sound stayed the same. And I actually prefer that because these huge box sets can frankly be very, very daunting. And this is very accessible. Like I said, there's a vinyl version of it that I would also recommend. If you do pick up this box set and you're looking for more, you're wondering what else you could do to, you know, where else you could go with this, I would also recommend, it's out of print, but you can find it, the Johnny Cash Show DVD set. This does, I have the 2-disc version. There was a 1-disc and a 2-disc version. It does have Dylan performing I Threw It All Away and The Girl from North Country. By the way, Chris Christopherson, what I didn't mention that the liner notes tells me is that Chris Christopherson was a gopher during these Nashville sessions with Johnny Cash. He was in the room going to get this, going to get that, going to, you know, writing notes about things. They're from the Genesis. He would eventually become a peer of these guys, and I love that. Also, you may have noticed my shirt in the intro to this video. There was a a country music Hall of Fame exhibit a few years ago called Dylan, Cash, and the Nashville Cats. And this is the audio accompaniment of that exhibit. And you might be like, well, why do I care about this? You know, the exhibits go over, what do I care? Well, there's a case to be made. In fact, it's made in the companion book, which I don't think is available anymore. This was for the Country Music Hall of Fame, but it's full of notes about how the union of Dylan and Cash, these two icons in their respective fields, you know, a counterculture icon, and then, you know, Cash is pretty counterculture himself, but he's also playing in the Nashville country music system. The union of these guys, the friendship that they had, opened the door for so many rock music icons to come and record in Nashville. Basically, that's what this is. It's 2 CDs of rock and roll musicians in Nashville and sort of what came out of it. We have Joan Baez, her version of The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Really, really interesting recordings that show, look, the Monkees, the Byrds, you know, the Byrds came and recorded in Nashville. And it illustrates that this time was important and that the walls between genres were being knocked down. Because of this time period, we have country rock. We have that what would become the Eagles, you know, all that stuff. We're talking about borders being knocked down and new territory being forged, and that's really, really cool. So I recommend this set if you're looking for more of that. It also has fantastic liner notes about, look at Paul McCartney, Linda McCartney, Dolly Parton, Porter Wagoner. That's amazing. That's so cool. So, guys, I give Travelin Thru by Bob Dylan my highest recommendation. It's frankly the first bootleg series in several years that I don't find to be daunting. It doesn't feel like homework. It's not something I need to take notes for. It's just a good listen. I just throw it on, listening to Bob Dylan banter with Johnny Cash. It is incredible. This hits me at my crossroads. Country, rock and roll. I love it. Highest recommendation. So if you're going to pick it up, let me know. Guys, what do you think about Bob Dylan? What do you think about Johnny Cash? Let's continue, as always, let's continue the conversation in the comments below this video. I hope I have been able to help shine a light on what makes this material so unique and special. Clearly, you can tell I'm passionate about it. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you making it to the end of this video. Really, thank you so much. So take care, and until next time, we will catch you later.